Hello and welcome to another mini episode of What the Faux Travel Podcast with Nick and Amy. This one's all about volunteering.
This episode is sponsored by Storyteller, the travel accessories company that helps provide access to a quality education for individuals in less privileged areas of the world.
Hello guys, thank you very much for joining us, and this is a big topic and sometimes a controversial one. So we have three great guests to help us dissect it.
Yeah, so we'll start with Lina from the Budgeteers. Those of you who watch their YouTube channel will know exactly who they are and know that she's got some pretty strong views on volunteering. So we've asked her along to highlight some of the issues with unethical volunteering. Some people refer to it as voluntourism.
Then we'll be joined by Bhav, who is the founder of Storyteller, our new sponsor. We'll have a chat about volunteering in general and ask him some tough questions about it.
And the third and final person we're going to hear from is Jen Morilla, aka Social Girl Traveller. From her, we'll find out how her and Storyteller are working together and separately as well to help people all around the world in a sustainable and ethical way.
So, a lot coming up, so let's get to it. Starting with our first guest.
Thanks so much for having me on the show, guys, and for letting me share my opinion, even if it's a controversial one.
That's Lina from the YouTube channel The Budgeteers. We've actually had them on the show before, so if you don't know who they are, go back to our episode with Paddy, where we talk all about budget travelling. So we started our chat with Lina by asking her, what is voluntourism?
So voluntourism is essentially what it sounds like. It's a form of travel or tourism where instead of just going to a country to do regular sightseeing or tourism, you would take some time out of your travels to do a specific volunteer project. So you would offer your time and your skills to maybe help an at-risk community or do work through a charity or an organization of some sort, or it could even be mission work.
So that's what voluntourism is, but what's the problem with it?
My biggest issue with voluntourism is that oftentimes sustainability is overlooked. So what I mean by this is when you have a problem you're trying to create a solution, you obviously want to find a solution that will not only continuously get better over time, but that will actually last. Usually what unfortunately happens with these voluntourism projects is that instead of creating sustainable solutions, they end up creating what's called a band-aid solution or a quick fix. So these band-aid solutions, they might be because the volunteers, they don't have the proper skills, they don't have enough formal training, or they just don't have the time to dedicate to these projects and to the roles that they've signed up for. So their service becomes less effective, it becomes less sustainable, and they just don't end up making a very valuable contribution to the host community. I see this a lot in volunteering projects to go teach English. So in many countries, simply being a native English speaker is enough of a qualification for somebody to go teach English. What's the problem? I think this sends the message and it sets up a biased standard that people of developing countries, they're not seen as worthy of instruction or education that is as rigorous, standardized, or maybe even as competent as those in developing countries. So the lack of training and the lack of consistent teachers, it creates subpar education and it creates subpar lessons. In a lot of situations with these sorts of volunteering projects, there's a constant turnover in teachers. So there's always new teachers coming in every few weeks, every few months. And what happens is, every time there's a new teacher, these students, they're going back to square one. They're going back to the beginning. So their education, it just isn't advancing. And that's because of a lack of consistency and continuity. And so the education, it becomes ineffective and it becomes stagnant learning. Another problem that sometimes happens is that sometimes through these volunteer projects, you can end up burdening a community. So maybe by filling a position with a volunteer, it could have been filled by a skilled local worker who probably could have done it better and who, more importantly, could have been compensated for their work. Now, this all happens because unfortunately volunteering and voluntourism, it's all become a business. So usually when you want to go abroad and you want to go volunteer your time or your skills, what people do is they get online, they find an organization and a project that they like or that, that they want to go do. And so they'll pay money to this organization, and in exchange for their work, the organization will give them accommodation and food in exchange for their work. So these organizations, unfortunately, a lot of times they'd rather accept a volunteer with a lack of skills rather than turn down the money. Another problem that I see driving from all of this becoming for profit and becoming a business is that at-risk communities are being put into harm's way. A really prominent example of this is the orphanage volunteering programs, and specifically in Cambodia. You can go and work and volunteer in orphanages all over the world, but it's a big project in Cambodia. So it's been found that nearly 80% of orphans in Cambodia aren't actually orphans. So what does this mean? It means that children are being taken away from their families, they're being exploited, sometimes they're being hurt, abused. And why? Because people in Cambodia see that people are willing to pay money to come to Cambodia to stay in these orphanages for a few weeks, maybe a few months. And they just see the money. They want to make the money. So if they need an orphanage, they need orphans. And who ends up being hurt? These children. They end up being taken from their families. They end up being put into situations that aren't safe. The UN found that in Cambodia, there's been a 75% increase in its number of orphanages since 2005. This increase aligns with a 250% increase in tourism. So there's a problem here. Again, people in Cambodia see that people are willing to pay money to come and volunteer in these orphanages, and they want that money. And who ends up being hurt? The children. So I'm not discouraging people from wanting to help, from wanting to, create solutions and to help problems that they're everywhere. They're abroad, they're in our own communities. And I don't want people to take this all the wrong way. I don't think volunteering is always a bad thing. But again, what's most important to me is that sustainability and sustainable solutions are being created through these volunteering projects. And so what I advise people to do is really do your research. Really be mindful of what you're signing up for and what you're going to do. Really ask yourself, is this going to create a solution, or is this just going to be a quick fix? If you're going to go volunteer through an organization, ask that organization the hard questions. Don't be afraid to get the information and to get all of the information about what you're going abroad to do. And another piece of advice I have is cut out the middleman. As I said, usually these organizations, they're going to give you food and accommodation in exchange for your work. Cut out that organization. Don't pay money. Don't pay hundreds, thousands of dollars to these big organizations. Instead, go to the source, find who's doing these projects and who's out there helping in the community, and think about how you're going to affect the community that you're going to help. So again, I'm not discouraging anybody to not volunteer, but simply be aware and remember that what we want is sustainable solutions.
Wow, some really interesting facts there. Obviously, we've done our research on voluntourism, not only because it's something we've looked at before, but also for doing this episode. And isn't that shocking what's happening in Cambodia? And I'm sure it's happening in other countries. So obviously we don't want to just kind of put Cambodia down. But that's just shocking that these kids are being taken away from their home.
Very eye-opening and kind of makes sense. You think of these orphanages around the world and there'll be lots of genuine orphanages that do great work that you can volunteer at. But yes, in some places they'll have an orphanage, but not enough orphans. So what do? They find orphans, or they make kids orphans, or in the case of Cambodia, if that's true, 80% of the orphans in Cambodia, they're not even orphans. So that is quite shocking. It can show the negative side of mass tourism.
Absolutely, and we don't want this episode to be kind of scaring people into not doing it, and that's why later, as well as with what the advice Lina gave at the end there, just make sure it's sustainable, cut out the middleman, things like that. We're going to give you tips on doing it in the best and safest way. Also, the other thing I was going to say from what Lina said was the whole education thing, and it's so true that really they have such a lack of quality education, because it's kind of giving more of an experience to the tourist rather than the children. Really, it should be the children come first. Yeah, are you going to come here and are you going to stay in the job for longer than a year or longer than a month, you know? And so many people I've heard go somewhere and they don't have their TEFL qualification. So that's the qualification you do to teach English as a foreign language in another country.
Yep.
I've heard so many people say, oh, you know, they don't actually look for the qualification. You can just get a job there. And that's really scary, because I myself have always taken a keen interest in English. You know, I got A's for my GCSEs in English. I got first in my dissertation in uni. This is just like me bragging.
All right, Amy.
But what I'm saying is, I'm competent in writing, but I still wouldn't feel comfortable teaching English, even though it is my first spoken language. And I think people just need to, and Lina's right, they have a lower expectation of what that education should be, the quality of it. Mm-hmm. And it's quite sad really when we think about it.
Yeah, who's getting shortchanged? Yeah, the students and the kids in the case of what Lina was talking about. But that's why I wanted to get her on, because very interesting views, which a lot of people might not have thought of before today.
Absolutely, yeah. So thank you, Lina. That was Lina from the Budgeteers.
Now it's time to bring in Bhav Patel, who is the founder of Storyteller. So we drove up to their headquarters in Birmingham a couple of weeks ago for a chat. And we started by asking him what's his background in volunteering.
So actually, my initial background is as a lawyer, so the complete opposite to volunteering. But actually, whilst working as a lawyer, I was heading up the corporate responsibility programs. And essentially what this is when corporate companies want to get involved with different charities and organisations, they lead a different set of projects and have a charity of the year, which they work closely with to run these initiatives. So I ran this for a number of years when I was working as a lawyer. And now my interest came once we first started with this, really. After about 3 to 4 years, I think the impact I was creating through this really touched me. And I think suddenly the goalposts changed for me. And I really enjoyed the impact I was able to create through these initiatives. And actually, I want to do more of it.
Lovely. And so where has your volunteering taken you around the world?
So I volunteered a lot with organisations who work globally. But then since then, I volunteered in South America and different parts of Asia, and most recently, India.
So Bhav, why do you think that volunteering is so appealing to a lot of travellers?
So I think as travellers, we see and we understand travel and have the complete experience. I think new places, people's smells, and the sounds and everything that travel brings us actually helps us understand and inspires us to travel more. But also, whilst there's so many positives about travelling, we see and get the first-hand perspective on the world's biggest problems. And I just actually wanted to share one of the issues and one of the statistics that we recently came across, really, in terms of education. So 750 million adults around the world now are illiterate, and 1 out of 5 children and youth are out of school. And actually, that's a huge amount of people globally. And I think as travellers, we see these problems probably a lot more than others because of the amount of times that we see it. So, for example, an issue in terms of education is that we might see this, for example, when we're travelling in India, but then we might say the same issue again, the issues where children are unable to get access to education again in South America.
So you brought South America up. Is that the continent that's predominantly illiterate then?
Well, when I went to Peru recently, actually not long ago, that was one of the issues where I came across a lot, where children were, walking on the streets at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And I think it was slightly confusing because you think, well, surely you're at the point where you should be at school right now. And then when I kind of talked about this further with the local community, it was very much that for either they couldn't afford to get to school, they couldn't actually afford to get to school because of costs which were involved, or actually the fact that the distance to actually get to the school was too far, so they couldn't actually get there. So there's a number of things where children were not being able to get to school and get that access to education, and actually it became a part of second nature where people were just so used to it that it was not really seen as an issue anymore.
That's really interesting, and actually something that we found when we went to South America, particularly Brazil. We was in a favela and there were kids running around all the time, but we actually found out that they do school in a different way, so everybody has time slots. So some kids might be at school in the morning and then some might be in the afternoon. So I think it's just important to point out that just because they're not at school during the day, like, that might not mean they definitely don't go to school.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because there weren't enough teachers. So they had to take the kids in batches of 2s or 3s or whatever. So yeah, ideally they would be in school 5 days a week, all day, but just wasn't enough teachers. And what we found in the favelas, I'm sure you'd agree with this, you would have seen this all around the world, I'm sure. Yeah. Once those kids don't have access to this education, they're just destined to forever live the same life. There's no way out of poverty, is there?
Yeah, and I think after a while, people just get used to this cycle, and I think they see it as because they see their parents in that same cycle again, and actually the problem is that the deprivation not only has consequences for them but also for the next generation. I mean, it becomes essentially a repeat cycle of inequality and poverty.
So we got a question on the journey up here, actually, to Birmingham to see you, Bhav. We got a question on Instagram from Robbie Coulter. He said, how much research do you do to ensure that whatever volunteering you're doing is ethical and supportive and it isn't disruptive to local communities?
First of all, hi Robbie, great question. So there's a couple of areas that I research ahead of doing any volunteer placements really, and we've done the same with our charities that we work with. The first thing I would look at in particular is this charity in line with what I believe in, and will I be able to achieve the outcome I want from it from a personal perspective? And to do that, I think there's a few questions I'd ask is, what are the organisation's proven outcomes and what have they done previously? You can really see the type of projects that the charities run and actually the impact they've had already to see how successful they've been in terms of doing their projects at the same time. And then in terms of whether we're taking away local jobs, I think in terms of that, we are helping local areas basically by volunteering, and actually we work in collaboration with them, which is essentially beneficial for them and impactful for them in the long term. So I think that definitely outweighs everything else.
So obviously there's loads of different types of volunteering out there, but so some people might say you're working at an orphanage and you're there for a month and you become really attached to the children. Some people might say that that's actually more damaging to the children and their well-being, because if they're orphans, then obviously they don't have their parents there, they don't have a guardian, so they're kind of making that relationship with someone for it to then be taken away again. So it's really difficult to kind of determine whether what you're doing is good. Is it best that child has at least that small bit of a good relationship or nothing at all? It's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it's difficult. And I think we can, for example, if we were really connected to somebody for a certain amount of time, then all of a sudden it's taken away from us, it does impact us. But at the same time, we can give so much in, for example, a 3-month project to that child that you would look at it in terms of impacting someone and in their life for that period of time will actually change their lives. One of the things that we did were working with a set of children in India recently, where we worked with the same set of children in different areas, and actually we did have a lot of connection with them because we've been working day to day with them for a 3 to 4 week period. We built a really good relationship with them, and at the end I think they were really upset to see us go, and we're still in touch now actually. I mean, we'd have the random Skype calls in the morning just to say hello and good morning, but I think since then I've just been in contact with the teachers who have said actually what you've shared here with the children, they remember you for the fact that you helped them understand the importance of education, why they need to actually keep studying and carry on past a certain age, but also the fact that how that will help them achieve in the long term. So they remember you for these particular areas. So they remember the relationship, but also the impact you've had. And I think that's much more credible than potentially breaking a heart after leaving after a certain amount of time, which also obviously it is impactful, but at the same time, the long-term impact you're leaving on them is and it outweighs it a lot more.
Yeah, that's really nice. You had a positive impact on their lives, but you're still in their life because, like you said, you sometimes Skype. So that's really nice. Yeah, I like that. So what advice do you have for someone who, they're really keen to travel and see the world, but they want to give back, they want to do some good as well? So anyone who's thinking about it, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of areas probably I would look at, and I think 3 particular areas I would say would be to ensure that you find out, firstly, where your passion lies. Secondly, what impact do you want to achieve? And thirdly, where are your skills mostly suited? So in terms of where your passion lies, before you start researching the charities, just ensure that what particular impact and what particular project do you want to help, whether that's helping children or adults obtain education, whether it's helping an animal shelter, whatever your passion is, just focus on that particular area and you can lead from then onwards. Secondly, do your research. There are many charities out there who all do incredible work, but to ensure that you are able to have an impact that you want, I'd really recommend researching particular projects and particular charities to an extent where you understand their brand values, what they stand for, and essentially what they do. So when you're out there, when you're assisting them, what will your role be? And I think that's really important because then you know what you're signing up for in advance. So even if that's having a conversation with one of the charity project managers, someone who's volunteered before at that particular charity, whatever it may be, just do your research and get all the information you need. And thirdly, I'd say use your skills. I think all of us are super talented in terms of so many different ways, and using the skills that we have, sometimes we don't use them as much as we should. And I think sharing, especially as travelers, I think we learn so much on the road, whether that's sharing skills of teamwork, whether it's communication with people from around the world, whatever it is. I think we all have talents and passions that we can share with lots of people around the world. So work out what your passion is and make the best use of them and create the impact that you want to.
Brilliant. Yeah, and we are going to be talking about Storyteller in a little while, and I definitely want to get into it because that's one of the things that really attracted us to Storyteller, is that you don't only kind of volunteer with people and help them, you teach them skills to better their lives and all of that. But we'll get into that later. So shortly we're going to be talking to Jen Morilla, who is known as Social Girl Traveller on Instagram, and she calls herself an impact traveller. Now, Bhav, you know Jen. How do you know her?
So actually, I came across Jen when I was looking for a brand ambassador for Storyteller. So I wanted to work with somebody who would fit the brand seamlessly without changing anything about themselves or their brand. That's when I came across Jen in an article actually on Elite Daily, where there was a traveller who had impacted 12,500 lives and travelled to over 35 countries. And I was like, perfect, that's the person I need on board.
Wow.
And then I visited Jen's website and actually I saw some amazing trips that she'd taken, and they were all purpose-driven with direct impact on people's lives. Then I just reached out to Jen, told her about the incredible work and the passion that she did things with, and then I really wanted to work with her. So we kicked off actually, we had a call and it just kicked off from there really, and we've been doing some amazing work since then.
That was a really good introduction to Jen from Bhav there. But before we hear from her, I just want to say that number again. 750 million adults are illiterate in this world.
Which is mind-blowing because the whole population of our country, the UK, is about 70 million. And he was talking about 700 million illiterate. And what was it? 1 in 5 kids aren't in school?
1 in 5 children are out of school. See, if somebody said the ratio of children that are out of school, I probably would have said 1 in 20, I think.
I was thinking 1 in 10, but it's eye-opening. But, I think we're in 2018. Maybe I'm being naive, but I thought things would be better than that.
Absolutely, especially because we hear all these good things. So when we travelled to India on our honeymoon, when we was in Trivandrum, we were told that in their state, there was 100% literacy rate. So, because you always hear these good statistics, it's really shocking when you hear the bad ones.
Yeah, for sure. But it's important to be reminded.
Absolutely. So let's move on to Jen now. So she mentions NGOs in our interview. For those of you who don't know, an NGO is a non-government organisation. So let's hear from her now. Jen's been travelling the world and helping people at the same time. So we asked her what she's been doing and what's her story.
So I call myself an impact travel blogger. I've been traveling the globe for the past 3 years with clean water filters. Each water filters for 100 people for up to 5 years, and I've been implementing them in communities around the world. I work with nonprofits on the ground to really create a bigger impact. then like implement these water filters and then distribute them through the communities. Again, each water filter is for 100 people up to 5 years. I've impacted an estimate of 13,500 lives, which is pretty amazing, but it's not exactly where I want to be. My goal is to reach 1 million by 2022. When I started 3 years ago, I didn't want to just be a travel blogger. I felt like being a travel blogger and, traveling for luxury was, I don't want to say it's easy because it's definitely not easy, but I feel like it was very saturated, right? So from a business standpoint, I felt like I needed to really narrow it down. And then from a personal standpoint, I have a master's in social entrepreneurship. So my passion's always been in the social sector, right? A company that creates profit and a percentage of the revenue goes to a cause, right? So social impact. And that was my passion. And when I was working in the marketing world, because my old life was an account manager at a marketing firm in New York City. And when I left that behind, I really wanted to do something different. I wanted to change the world. And that was what kept me going. It was really weird. It was something that I kind of felt like I had to do. And I left everything behind to start traveling. And I didn't have a set plan. I had an idea. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know when. It just knew that I had this idea that I wanted to travel for good. And so I was in Dominican Republic. Well, the water filters and how it all came about was I was in Dominican Republic and I was working with the Paradisius Resort because I was writing an article and, doing a video on what they do as a sustainable resort and like how they help the community and stuff. And then I was volunteering at an orphanage that they work with, right? They work with a boys orphanage that they, teach them the skills that they need to then get a job within the resort, right? Whether that's management positions or a cooking position or, running staff, whatever the case is. And so I was at this orphanage and, these kids are young and I realized that they were, taking showers with this bucket of water. Well, it wasn't a bucket, it was like a tank of water that only refilled once a week. And they use that same water to take a shower, to wash dishes, and to cook. And you're talking about 100-degree weather, and this like big container that was full of water was sitting outside. There's like flies everywhere. And I was just sitting there and I was like, oh my God, like this is terrible. It's 2015. What is this? And so that's what started the water filter, right? I'm like, there is a necessity. This needs to be done.
So I think that proves that it's amazing what can happen when you just go for things and you open yourself up to opportunities because, Jen was there volunteering, as she just said, but she spotted another problem with the quality of the water. And that then started a chain of events and pretty much changed her life, which we're going to go into very soon. So we then wanted to ask Jen if she thought volunteering can be unethical.
Yes, I actually am very cautious about the NGOs that I work with. When I first started on this journey and I wanted to quote unquote volunteer, I saw that, there were companies that were asking for a lot of money, like, almost $3,000 to go, for a weekend or for a week and just volunteer in these places. And then that's it. Like there wasn't no education. There was nothing. Like you were volunteering in a location, like maybe it was like building a home and then you were spending, a week there. My mentality and when I work with NGOs is I really like to see, or even companies in general, like I really like to see, what they're bringing to, what they're doing for the people in the communities, right? So the idea that I have is you go to a country and you teach the people within that community to build homes so that when you leave, they can continue to build more homes. There are so many factors to building homes, to helping people in certain communities and things that we don't know about, right? When I implement these water filters and I bring them to communities, I have to ask questions like, is there running water? Or do they have to travel really far? Do they use soap? Are they hygienic? Like, are they prepared for, to be clean? Hygiene is such a valuable thing. And for us, I feel like it's common sense, but you'd be surprised that in most countries it isn't. They don't have resources to soap. Some countries, they don't even know what soap is. And if they do, they can't afford it. So yeah, you bring them clean water, but they're going to the bathroom and they're not wiping their hands and then they're just drinking the water that they're going to the bathroom with, you know what I mean? Like they're the dirty hands with. So it's just like it's a domino effect. And it has to be fixed from the root. And that's the mentality that I hold, right? I don't believe that throwing money at a situation is what's going to fix something. I do believe that money helps the situation, definitely. Because I don't think that and I think it's really naive to say that you can run the world without money or you can run a business without money. And that's not true. An NGO is a business. And I started to realize that a lot of these NGOs, the reason why the cost was so high is because the percentage of the money goes directly to the admin, which makes sense. I mean, people got to get paid to work, and it's totally normal. It's totally cool. But then what percentage of that money actually goes to the community that needs it the most, right? So those are the kind of questions that I would bring up. So yeah, I do think that sometimes it really is unethical. What I do when I work with communities on the ground is I bring these water filters that are donated from my community, my social media community, bring these water filters. And then along with that, I partner with like a soap brand. There's a soap brand that I'm partnered with is called Hand in Hand Soap. And they are a social enterprise. So buy a soap, give a soap. That's like the business mentality for it. They've donated over 1 million bars to Haiti. And so I'll bring some of these soaps down with me in the country that I'm, volunteering in and teach people like, okay, so this is how you use the water filter. And the most important thing is that you make sure you clean your hands before you clean the filter, because once you contaminate the filter is no longer good. So there's no point in even trying to drink clean water, because you're not going to drink clean water because the filter is already contaminated. So you have to maintain hygiene. You have to make sure that that's something that you teach them. And I think that's huge. I also, a lot of these communities that I work with women. Women do run the world. I don't think they do. I know they do. We absolutely 100% run the world. Most of the communities that I've worked with, a lot of the women or the people that I work with are females, because they run the household, right? They make sure their children are clean, they're fed, and they're, they have nutrition and all that stuff. And so they are I don't want to say the bread makers, but they're definitely the king of the castles or the queen of the castles in that case. If somebody wants to do something like I do, number one, just do it. If you really, really want to do it, find a great company that you truly and deeply connect with, and absolutely do it. Get ready to be stepping out of your comfort zone. And understand that it's going to be something very, very different. And it is absolutely doable. If you want to do something like me, like completely solo, and you don't want to go with a company, the company that I use the water filters is called Waves for Water. And I'm not affiliated with them or anything like that. I just use their platform to give me the credibility to ask people to donate money so that I can get these water filters. But anybody can use that platform. Anybody can do it if you have a following, and not even like a big following. I'm talking about 100 people on Facebook. Just create a campaign of I don't know how many filters you want. Each filter is for $50. So let's say you're going to Mexico and you want to take down 3, that's $150. Put up a fun page for $150 and put it on Facebook and tell your community, hey guys, I'm going to Mexico and I really want to bring some water filters. This is what you do. The problem is though, I will say, don't go to Mexico for 3 days and then expect to drop these water filters off somewhere, because that's just a waste. You have to understand that you're going to communities and you're going to these places, and these filters, nobody knows what they are. You can't just be this, American white person dropping off filters thinking that everyone's going to thank you and praise you for it, because it's not really how it works. The first time that I did this, I went to Indonesia. And I brought over a few water filters, and I had planned to stay in Indo for just 2 weeks. I ended up staying for a month. The community leader that I was connected with wasn't as helpful as I thought he was going to be. So I had to basically make friends with a different local, a completely different way. I couldn't just give them these water filters because they didn't know what to do with them. And I was like, this is a lot of money, 1, and 2, it's a need. People actually need this. It would be such a shame to just drop this off somewhere in a bucket and some person and then have him figure it out. No, my intention is to teach somebody how to use this so it can really be impactful, right? I think keep that in mind. It's remember that you can do it. It is not difficult. Anybody can do it. You just have to want the drive to do it.
There you go. I completely agree with Jen there. You can't just give money, pay for something and hope that it's going to get better. We have to educate and we have to help and really invest time as well as money for these sorts of things to work. I also agree with Jen. Us ladies, we do run the world. All you queens
argue.
Out there.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that.
Okay, so following on from that, we asked Jen to explain her relationship with Storyteller.
Bhav reached out to me. Actually, I think we found each other on Instagram, and I had an idea of what Storyteller was, but I really didn't go deep into it until he reached out, and then we had a phone call. And then the brand just, we connected on so many levels. It turned into a friendship, and him and I talk weekly and stuff like that. But I really resonated with the brand because I saw his passion for what he was doing, right? The fact that it was education, I think that's one of the biggest things that's missing. I say 2 things are missing in our societies, and it's education and connection. Education being like the fundamental basis of education, right? The simple things, right? Learning how to brush your teeth, learning how to say thank you, learning how to wash your hands, learning your ABCs. Those fundamental values are absolutely missing in a lot of these third world countries. And so education is huge for me. And the second thing is that human connection, like I said, we live in a world where everybody's, on YouTube and on Facebook, and all of this is amazing because we are at capacity where we can grow bigger than any generation at any point in history. But when do you sit down and say hello to your neighbor? When do you have that connection? And I think that's really huge. So I love Storyteller's value, and I love the impact that they make when they do projects on the ground and stuff like that. So I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. And hopefully in 2019, him and I are going to be working together closely and definitely creating bigger impact. So I'm excited about that. My blog is called The Social Girl Traveler, so you can find me across every platform as The Social Girl Traveler. That's Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, my website, The Social Girl Traveler. Feel free to reach out with any questions on any platform. My email is on my Instagram, it's on my Facebook, it's everywhere really. If you want to send me an email, that's totally fine too. But yeah, I'm always open to talking to my community and connecting and giving suggestions about, how to create a brand like this, or how to just do something like how I've done and just go out there and create impact. True advocate of that. And I support it very much. So feel free to reach out if anybody has any questions. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so excited about it. And this was so much fun. Thank you guys.
Jen Morilla there, aka Social Girl Traveller. So thank you very much. And that was really interesting to hear a good example of someone who is an impact traveller. I didn't even know that phrase before today, but it was...
And a queen, can I just say?
And a queen who runs the world. Had a question on Instagram from Amy Walker, and she asked, how can you make sure you're volunteering responsibly and it's not just voluntourism? Well, I guess there's no one magic answer to that, unfortunately, but you've now heard from Lina, Bhav and Jen, and you've heard what they do to try and ensure that they are volunteering responsibly and ethically, so I hope that has answered your question.
So we're going to head back to our chat with Bhav now. He's going to explain to us what Storyteller is and about some of the great work that they do around the world.
So although we are not a charity, we just believe that all companies should actually give back and do their bit in terms of helping projects around the world. So we wanted to make sure that we wanted to prove that companies can have a balance between profit and philanthropy, which can generate a positive outcome for all individuals involved. So there's three key aspects really to Storyteller, and it's all combined into what we do overall. So we build awesome travel accessories. We inspire people to travel more, and we help fund educational programs and workshops in underprivileged areas of the world. And we do this by using a share of our profits, resources and volunteers to help run these educational workshops. So rather than just providing funds and saying, here's some cash, sort it out yourselves, we believe on being hands-on and in helping to run focused and effective workshops.
Fantastic. So can you give us some details about the charities or organisations that you do work with, that you help, and what those charities do?
In terms of, like we discussed earlier, really, we wanted to make sure that we researched and we worked with charities that fitted with our brand vision. And actually, for us, our long-term vision is to impact 1 million lives by providing knowledge and educational resources in less privileged areas of the world. So we took a step back and thought, who's going to be part of our team, who's going to help us achieve this? So we handpicked particular charities, and they are UNICEF Next Generation, Global Citizen and the Barefoot College. And we based it on the incredible impact that they've already made in terms of education, but also globally in terms of other avenues as well. But secondly as well, we chose them because of the particular projects that they support and that they run. And to do this, actually, we spent a lot of time with all three charities on the ground, most recently actually in India in April this year.
Lovely. And so you were talking about these key rings. So this is kind of the base of where your income comes from. Can you explain them? Because I think if you just say an accessories kind of keyring, it doesn't sound that good. And I'm not just saying this because you're our sponsor. They look really slick. They're a nice leather keyring, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're made from faux leather. So basically the concept came from actually having something which was physical to collect your special travel chapters, and actually something that you could also use as your storytelling item. So we brought together the longevity of a travel journal and simplicity of a souvenir to create Flagmate. So Flagmate's a faux leather keyring, which you attach hand-painted flags of each country that you visited, and then you've got the option to engrave your special memory from that particular place on the back. So just capture your adventure of travel and share it with the world.
Yeah, and they look really cool. So it's anything that you can put, even if you don't travel a lot, it could be something that goes on your keys. But even if you are so we're about to go full-time traveling, so it's something we could put on our rucksack or something like that. And yeah, I can't stress how good these keyrings look, because they have all the different flags on them. And when they're full, if you've gone to all the countries that there are, do they even move?
Yeah, so essentially, yeah, I think at the moment we're working on a bigger one for those people. I think we recently came across a lot of people who've been to about 60 countries as a minimum. So we're working on one which is just for them, and the Globetrotters among us as well. So, but at the moment you can fit 30 flags on each Storyteller Flagmate.
Okay, cool. And I just want to say to everyone, I can tell that Amy's being honest when she says, the flags are really great, because Amy's the worst person in the world at selling something, and I believed her then, so she really means it. No, they do look really good, and it's nice that, of course, there's a good message behind all of this. You help people, and your big thing really is education. It's a bit like that saying, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, but teach a man how to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. That's your big thing, isn't it? It's getting people out of poverty, and the key to doing that is through education.
Yeah, that's right. One of the examples actually when we were in India is we ran something called the Enrich project, which is with one of our charity partners, the Barefoot College. What this project does is it helps adults obtain education in terms of solar infrastructure, technology and micro enterprise. So in terms of the micro enterprise, that's essentially small businesses in business terms, but essentially what they do is they'll give you the skills to go away and actually create your own business and go away and actually bring in income for your family. Not only that, but each individual that attends this course then becomes a trainer, and will go back to their local village, wherever they are in the world, to then actually spread that knowledge. So essentially the trainer becomes a teacher.
Yeah, and that was one of the main things that kind of hit me when we met you for the first time, and you were saying that you did a business class with some local Indian people, and you're working in their local area, and you kind of expanded their mind to move to the next city along. And you were saying that they'd never really thought about that before.
Yeah, what we did actually was just explain pricing, packaging, and how they can bundle the products that they sell, and actually then work together with their local community to take them outside of the village and go to the next major city. So essentially they came together, went to the largest city which is nearby to them, and actually went across with larger bundles of products and actually sold a lot more. I mean, for me, I think it was very simply explain to them, this is how you can expand your business. But then the next day when I'm speaking to them and they're super grateful in terms of how it's just impacted what they've been doing for years to now this simple change and working together in collaboration, and how it's actually helped them in long term was just amazing for me to see. And actually the next day when they're coming across saying, what can we learn and how can we go further? It's just great to know that you've made that sort of impact to people already.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you came back, didn't they say to you, oh, it's amazing, yesterday we earned what we would have earned in a whole week,
yeah,
but in one day?
Essentially, yeah. So I think it's very small in terms of we shared a simple strategy with them, but the impact it has on them is long term. And I think it helped them that week, but we know that also that's impacted them in the long term. And actually that's something that they can implement and learn about more and more going forward.
And it kind of stays away from that whole, you're stealing people's jobs, local people, and you're helping that local community. And I think I just want to stress to anybody that's listening, if it's something that you're interested in, I'm sure, Bhav, you'd love to hear from them. So you gave us the example when we met for the first time, we could do a podcasting class with someone, any sort of skill that you have that you think would benefit somebody, then you can come and do your own little class. Yeah,
essentially, I mean, what we want to have for Storyteller is have Storyteller workshops around the world in collaboration with our charities, where people traveling around the world can actually share their skills. And actually, all of us that travel the world have got these particular life skills that we've learned probably on the road traveling, because that's the best place you learn these skills, that we can share with others. And I think this just shows an example of something very simple, but can make a great long-term impact. And I think not just globally, but we've seen these particular skills being shared in our local communities here in the UK, which has also helped upcoming young entrepreneurs and small businesses grow as well.
You've got involved with some sports teams quite a lot, haven't you? I think cricketers in India, and I think cricketers here in this country, but also footballers. Sports and education go hand in hand. So yeah, can you tell us some of the work you've done with sports people?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I noticed actually when I was in India was one of the classrooms, there were posters of a lot of cricketers on the wall, and actually they were probably replaced by some of the learnings they should have been doing, but they were replaced with famous cricketers, which shows the actually love and passion for the sport in India. But actually at the same time, for a lot of us as well, a lot of sports professionals are idols, whether that's because we support a particular team or also because of their particular talent. They've grown, and actually we've loved them because of lots of different things. So I think when I saw that, I thought, actually, how can we use the idols for these young children and actually help them understand the importance and actually growth that these sporting professionals actually go through to become where they are today. So actually in India, what we did was we took the class of children that we've been working with for the last few weeks on a bit of a surprise visit to the local IPL, which is the Indian Premier League team, where they met Shane Warne, who's a famous cricketer, actually, that most of you probably know, an Australian cricketer, and also the vice captain of the Indian cricket team, Ajinkya Rahane. So actually what we asked them to do was just share the importance of education, how they've continued to be educated, and actually physically, mentally, how they continue to grow their skill sets to keep achieving in, whether that's in sport, playing right now, or like Shane, continuing within the coaching field as well.
Very interesting stuff, and like Nick said, education and sports really go hand in hand. So finally, for anybody that is listening, how can anyone get involved with Storyteller?
Yeah, sure. Get involved in any way you want. That's what I'd say. We're always looking to grow our team of super storytellers really around the world, and we'd love to hear from you and join our mission, whether that's to help us create inspirational travel content, rock our incredible products, or join our volunteering projects around the world. Simply drop us a message on email or on Instagram, where we're most active as well, and we'd love to hear from you all.
So we are coming towards the end of this little chat, but Bhav, anything you want to add?
Yeah, sure. On the 3rd of September this year, so get it on your diaries, guys, we're running a crowdfunding campaign, and essentially it's our way to say thank you to all of you, all of our followers, and give you the opportunity really to purchase our Flagmate and all of our Storyteller products at a special launch price. So it's a one-off event, but essentially just for all of us to say thank you, and also for us to raise funds for our next projects, which will be taking place over the next few months.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this volunteering debate with us. I feel like I've learned a lot.
It's been really interesting. I knew it would be a big topic. So, Bhav, thank you very much for joining us. And here's to What the Foe and Storyteller working together.
Incredible, guys. And thank you so much again for having such an incredible travel podcast. As I was saying before the show, really, that something that we knew about you guys before actually we spoke, and actually it was something that there's not many travel podcasts out there which show real and authentic travel for what it is, and actually keeping it so entertaining for all of us, where we learn about travel, but also we learn actually all through your amazing games throughout about things like the Olympics in Norway, which I would have failed every single question, Nick. So well done, Amy, for getting at least one of them. I would have failed them all. So yeah, kudos, guys.
Thank you so much for the kind words. Yeah, obviously, these silly games, if you learn something, then that's great. And if you're entertained, amazing. We try. But thank you very much. Mic drop.
So there we go. Bhav, thank you very much for your kind words there. You're making us blush while we record this. So there we go. It seems like education and sustainability is the key here to ethical volunteering. Thank you to all of our guests today for your time. That's Lina from the Budgeteers, Jen, aka Social Girl Traveller, and of course Bhav from Storyteller, our sponsor of the podcast.
So before we leave you, we wanted to take this opportunity for a quick update on our travel plans.
Yes.
As we've said before a few times, we are selling all of our possessions, quitting our jobs, and very soon we are going to travel full time. Actually, as we record this, in about 2 weeks we leave, which is really cool, really exciting.
Can I just explain the situation?
What?
So our flat is pretty empty at the moment. We're currently sitting on the floor recording this.
Yeah, we
This
are.
is what we go through to record for you guys.
We are living in a hollow shell of a house at the moment. But weirdly, the more possessions we sell and the more money we get towards travelling, the better I feel, even though our house does look horrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can give you a quick update. So we've told you before we are starting our travels in Greece. Then we're going to Egypt, but we now know we're going to Jordan, Cyprus, and Turkey. So that's a good little start to our trip, a little Middle Eastern adventure. So if any of our listeners live in these countries, get in touch, show us around your hometown, and can we please stay with you, because we are going to be poor budget travellers.
But also because we want to meet you, you know, I mean,
of course. Number one, we want to meet you. Number two, we need a place to stay.
Is that the real order that they're going for you, Nick?
No.
Our next episode, we will be talking about Luxembourg, which is a bit of a strange one. I didn't think we'd be talking about that this series, but no, we haven't spontaneously travelled there. We're going to be talking to a guy called James from the Bottomless Pit podcast. So yeah, we'll be talking about Luxembourg. Also, we will update you on our travels where we can. We promise you we're going to be taking this on the road. We will see you soon, motherfuckers.
Don't forget, you can get in touch with the show. You can email us at whatthefopodcast@gmail.com. We are also on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And we are also on Patreon. For more information on all those things, you can go to our website at www.whatthefopodcast.com.